in Wales. So I'm afraid this year I'm in London and all I've got is a virtual background, but I'm in a very Christmassy spirit. So it's lovely to be with you all. And I'd like to just mention that we are currently being live streamed for the discussion, the fireside chat. So if you don't want to be live streamed, now is your chance to leave the call. Or if you're happy to be live streamed, just be aware that thousands and thousands and thousands of people are watching you. So be careful what you say and don't pick your nose. So a huge welcome to everybody from many continents, many time zones. I'm Hamish Sanderson. I'm the chair of White Report Global Limited, which is the umbrella company for Mediaspace, the new social media platform. I keep saying new, Kinga, as you write this script for me, but actually we've been around now since early 2020. We started to go online just before COVID hit. So we made a good decision. Some of you have been with us since early 2020. And the purpose of Mediaspace, as you all know, is to create a platform for media professionals to meet each other, not just to meet profiles, to have conversations, because we all know that no business starts without having a conversation to begin with. And to find out what's happening in our media world. There's extraordinarily rapid change that's occurred in the last 12 months. So today we'll have a little bit of a look back, as you do at the end of the year, and a little bit of a look forward. And I'd like to introduce a few people who will be part of that conversation today. So obviously we have Kinga, the founder and CEO of White Report and Mediaspace. Lavina Savendran, who's the head of content and communications. You'll hear from her later, and she is the tech host today. And my colleague and non-executive director, Phil McCauley, who's on the board of White Report Global. And alongside them are three very special guests. They have in common that they've all written books recently about the media. And so if you haven't filled up your Christmas stocking yet, there's still a chance to do so. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Alisa Grafton, who's a partner at the Pinner LP and the author of Great Networking, published in April. Giles Lury, a branding expert, director at the Value Engineers and author of no less than 15 books. The latest one is Wonder Women, Inspiring Stories and Insightful Interviews with Women in Marketing. And last but not least, Tim Hughes, author of Social Selling, again, just published in its second edition. So we're very pleased to have all three with us, and they will join me for a fireside chat. So the structure, as usual, will be a conversation with our special guest first, fireside chat, and then we will have a networking session. The live stream will be turned off. You can say whatever you want, and we'll have a conversation. Bear in mind, as is traditional with Mediaspace, this is not a webinar, this is an actual Zoom meeting, because we think it's really important that everyone has a chance to speak. And I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves with the usual very brief introduction so that you all have an opportunity to participate. Just a few house rules before we go any further. If you haven't already done so, could you make sure you've got your name on your screen, so I know who you are and can invite you to participate. Secondly, if you haven't already signed up to Mediaspace Global, please do sign up. This event is free and Mediaspace is free, but we do like to have you signed up. And if you'd like to share your name and address, you can put that on your Mediaspace profile, or you can put it in the chat so that we know how to get hold of you and we know that you were here. So I will stop there. Thank you again for joining us, and I will hand over to Kinga to say her few words of welcome. Over to you, Kinga.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Cool. Thank you. So my name is Kinga. I'm a media expert and the founder of Mediaspace.global. With Mediaspace, as some of you already know, we are building a new global ecosystem for leading and ambitious professionals in media, marketing, technology, and regulation to break elitist and local business bubbles and to create something new. We believe it's crucial to be active in the digital space and be more social, as everything is in a rapid transformation, professionally, economically, in terms of our lifestyle as well. So conversations are even more important these days. And that's why we love our global monthly networking sessions, because we can meet new people, not just social media profiles. We offer premium memberships to make you more visible and connected. And obviously, it just came out that we have to share our knowledge and expertise in terms of digital networking. So we are just launching our the Well-Connected Leader course, video course. So I'm very happy to have you here. And as you know, it's going to be a conversation about networking, branding, and social selling, all things that are so-called soft skills. And we believe it's very important to speak about these topics. So I can't wait to start the conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kinga. So over to the fireside chat. I hope you're all warm, even if you're not in front of a fire. And I'm going to ask our three special guests, Alisa, Giles, and Tim, to take us through some conversation, as I say, a little bit of looking back and a lot more looking forward. I'd just like to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves. And you've all got a new book, as I mentioned. When you introduce yourself, could you just say why it was that you wrote your new book? Or the new edition of your book. And then when we've done that, and people will be making notes for their Christmas present list, I'm sure, I'll ask you to say what you think. We'll go around the table to each of you in turn. What you think has been the biggest shift in the space where you are active in the past year? And then to finish, I'll ask you what's your bit of advice or maybe a prediction for the coming year, for 2023. So that's going to be the structure. So can I just ask each of you to introduce yourself briefly and tell us why you wrote your new book. So I'll start with you, Alisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Hamish, Kinga, and Lavina. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to be speaking to what looks like a collection of pretty awesome professionals working all in the media space. I do not work in the media space, but I have written a book which indeed, hopefully a lot of you would be able to relate to, or the topic at least. I'm an English lawyer. I'm a notary, criminal notary public. I'm currently a partner at a firm called The Pina, and we're based in the West End. And from 2023, I'm going to be rejoining actually the firm as a consultant, and also dedicating more time to educating and speaking on the subject of networking, professional relationships, and intergenerational networking, communication, and professional relationships. And this is my passion because during the pandemic, I've changed firms. I changed firms bang in the middle of the pandemic, having left the firm where I spent the first 20 years of my career. And as part of that, I was bringing over some clients to a new firm. And I was really worried about this because, basically bringing over clients meant that I had to rely on the relationships that I had formed with them. And to my complete surprise and delight, a lot of my clients decided to follow me. And when I started inquiring for the reasons, they all uniformly said that this is on the strength of our relationships. So they just gave me such a huge boost in the fact that all of my networking efforts in the previous 20 years had really started paying off. Obviously, they started paying off significantly before that, but that really shone the torchlight on the significance of professional relationships And but unfortunately, I realized that there weren't that many books on the market written by modern kind of practitioners. So I decided to do one myself. And the result of that is great networking, the art and practice of building authentic professional relationships, which is modestly positioned, strategically positioned right behind me. And this is the book which I feel a lot of people, especially those that are in the practice day to day, would be able to relate to. And it was primarily written with young professionals in mind, but I have since heard that a lot of older professionals also relate to the contents and find it useful.
Thank you, Alisa. I'm going to stop you there. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions and comments on your book. That's fantastic. And I'll come back to you again to ask you what you thought have been the major changes in the last year and what's coming up next year. Let me turn though now to Giles. Would you like to introduce yourself, Giles, and tell you what your new book is about?
Yeah. So as you said, I work a lot in branding and marketing. So when asked to describe myself, I often describe myself as a Lego watch wearing, Disney loving, VW driving, Chelsea supporting father of 5 who happens to be a director of a marketing consultancy. So surprise, surprise, tells you a little bit about you by just the brands you love and you use all the time. You credited me with 15 books. That's probably an over-exaggeration. It's only 8 so far of that. But most of the books I've written are books about brand stories. I love the little stories about how brands came into being, how they got their name, how they faced certain challenges, how they extended themselves and moved on. So I do quite a lot of work in that, and 3 or 4 of my books were about that. What then happened was I was talking about this with an ex-colleague of mine, and we were talking about how many of the protagonists in the stories I wrote were men. And we said, it's really interesting that women don't get their fair share of recognition for some of the great successes they've introduced into marketing. So she and I, Katie Machino that is, decided we'd co-author a book, and the book we wrote was called Wonder Women. And it was a celebration and a recognition of some women in marketing who've done fabulous things. If you don't know the story of Brownie Wise and how she transformed Tupperware, or Veuve Clicquot, for the French of you who'll know that that's the widow Clicquot, who innovated and led transformations in champagne. And then we did a whole series of interviews with lots of women in marketing, because what we wanted to see was what was the state of gender equality in the marketing business, and what were the challenges still being faced and what was going forward. So as a mix of stories, interviews, and our analysis, that's how we put it together and did our book, which came out as you had started in COVID times. Same for us in terms of where that was. So it's that, and I'm currently working on yet more stories, because branding never stops and there's always another little story to tell.
Giles, that's great. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to discussing that in a bit more depth with you shortly. Let me move on now to Tim. Tell us about yourself, Tim, and tell us about your new book.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me along today. It's a great session, and very nicely organized and very well put together. So thank you so much for that. Mine's the second edition. So this book came out in 2016, completely blew away the market. And the key thing is that we understand that social media has changed the world. It's changed the way that we do business, and it's changed society. I mean, who would have thought we would have been sitting on a Zoom call live streaming into social media, backed by a social media platform? I mean, it just beggars belief that that's now become the norm. And so what we did was that we updated social selling. So I disappeared for 2 weeks last Christmas and rewrote the book. So it's now got 306 pages rather than 187. What I did with the first book was I wanted to make sure it was a workbook that people could actually use. So one CEO said it's the first book that they've ever read where they've been able to connect social media with revenue and profit, which is what I always wanted it to do. I wanted it to be a book where if you read it, you can understand how you make money by using social media, both personally and both as a business. And what we've done is that we've actually updated it. And what I wanted to make sure was that we go out to practitioners who are actually doing the stuff right now. And so I've got input from Mercer, from Namos, Ring Central, Telstra, Cyberhawk, Ericsson, Headhunter. You know, if you want to find a job on social media, how do you get one? All of those things, and got them to actually contribute. One of the interesting things that I found is that Chris Fleming, and you can find Chris on LinkedIn, he's the CEO of Cyberhawk. He decided to become a digital business 2 years ago. And he's actually contributed that. So this is an organization that's taken the whole of their business and put it on digital. We're not talking about applications, we're talking about the empowerment of the people and the processes that are digital. And this also is not some future state. He did this 2 years ago. So if you're not a digital business, you're already 2 years behind. And so what we've done with this book is actually share that experience and share those skills with people, because what we think and what we believe is that the great thing about having a book like this is it empowers people and upskills people in digital. So that's a brief outline.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. That was very succinct and fascinating. And it's good to see that your book has life in it. Yeah, it's a second edition. We look forward to the third and the fourth and the fifth. Terrific. Now, I'll go back to Alisa and round the table again, the virtual table we've got. And Alisa, I'd like you to address the questions I mentioned earlier. I think perhaps combine them because we are limited in time, and I do want to come to the rest of the participants very soon. But would you like to tell us what you think has been the major change of significance in your world in the past year, and what you see coming up in next year, 2023, perhaps with a word of advice for us? So, Alisa, would you look back and would you look forward for us?
Thank you. Certainly will try my best. So the last year has been the first year in the last 3 years when we started again doing things offline more often than online. But the idea that you can connect virtually remains. And we have also learned that we can actually connect virtually just as well, or similarly to how we used to connect face to face. Yet people really miss the, that face-to-face contact, the vibes, reading sort of body language, or reading between the lines. We kind of grew bored and tired of just speaking or listening to a talking head. So people started going back to offline events. And there is this hunger for reconnecting, for meeting people, for establishing relationships. But that said, a lot of us feel pretty rusty when it comes to meeting people. Someone said they went to shake a person's hand at the start of the year and they missed. This is, and you would think that these kind of skills that would not disappear, but we are finding ourselves just that a little bit more uncomfortable, that a little bit more awkward when it comes to seeing and connecting with people face to face. Conversations are a little bit trickier to get going. So but on the positive side, that there is this unequivocal desire and understanding that it's so inherent to us as human beings to establish connections between us, and a lot of us are really seeking to expand our social capital. So this is the trend that I foresee continuing into 2023. And I think that there will be creating more opportunities for people to engage. This platform actually is fantastic because it allows people to meet people that otherwise would probably struggle to connect. We already established before this call started, or just at the start of the call, that a lot of us are located in different countries. Some are even on different continents. So isn't it amazing that we can do that? But this is not to preclude the possibility of future face-to-face meetings. So I think people will be emphasizing what's known as social skills, and we'll be revisiting the skill set that they need in order to connect with others authentically yet effectively. So I think what we previously thought was probably nice to have becomes a must-have, because technology is great, but it's the platform which helps us actually to then progress into these deeper connections, meaningful relationships that can actually make a huge difference, not only to our professional lives, to our careers, but also to our personal happiness. So this is, in a very concise manner, this is my prediction of what's to come in 2023. And I'm really looking forward to actually hopefully helping the professional society out there with some hints and tips that I put in my book.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alisa. That was terrific. Let's move straight on to Giles. Again, looking back over the past year, Giles, what have been the major changes in your world? And looking ahead, what do you predict, and any advice for us?
Okay. So I'm probably conscious that you talked about time, so I will try and draw the two strands together, because obviously one of the things is the book's very much about women in marketing, but branding in a broader sense is something that I've got my eyes on and thinking about a lot in the future. So I would go, actually, I think one of the big shifts is women have got angrier, and probably rightly so. And actually, as a believer that anger can be a force for good, that sometimes you have to get angry before you act, I'm actually really glad to hear that women are getting angrier, because while things have moved forward, there's still a lot to go. So that, I think, is something that's happened. In the branding world, this idea of what your company and what your brand stands for, and the use of the word purpose, many of you may have heard this being talked about as the sort of new mission statement, is coming to the fore, and it's what does your brand stand for? Those were the big shifts, I think, that a couple that we've seen. Tying those together in a prediction, I think the brand leaders of the future, and it was very much what all of our interviews with all of our women in marketing said, is the future has really got to embrace diversity and inclusion. It's not about making the world a woman's world, where it was perhaps a man's world in the past, but it's actually about taking the best characteristics, which are sometimes characteristics than male and female ones, and the good leaders of the future won't poo-poo the idea of intuition. Intuition is actually really fabulous. Supporters of it included a strange little chap called Albert Einstein, who said it was more important than intelligence, of where that was. Collaboration, working together and really understanding, staying grounded, in empathy. Some of these things that have traditionally been seen as the softer values, leaders of the future really need to embrace, whether they're in marketing or whether they are the CEOs. And the prediction, and I think I would say going forward, is hopefully we are going to see more of that, and we are going to see a continuing increase in the number of women in the boards and having a bigger say going forward. So we have a much more balanced leadership approach going into the rest of the decade.
Giles, thank you very much. That's very intriguing and fascinating. Let's move on lastly to Tim. Looking back, Tim, big changes for you in the past year, and what do you see in the coming year?
Yes, certainly we've seen over the last year the shift to digital has carried on over the last year. We've been talking about the modern digital buyer now for probably about five years, but we're now seeing the modern job hunter. My partner's 27-year-old, when he's been looking for a job this year, he was looking on social media and looking at the profiles of the company, the people that he would be working for, the senior people within those organizations, and he was expecting to see them online. Because we now have a modern buyer, the modern job hunter, and the modern investor, or online looking for these things. So what we've seen over this last year certainly is this move to digital dominance. Organizations that are recognizing that all of those people and their employees are online, and what we need to do is make that switch. And moving those people and empowering and giving them to the digital soft skills to actually make that change. In terms of looking to the future, what we're seeing is that we're seeing this shift from the physical world to the digital world. So, here we're sitting in the physical world, walking the dog is in the physical world. We switch on Mediaspace and we're in the digital world. And what we're seeing is that social media is this conduit into digital. And what organizations are recognizing that as people are now there, and the data shows that as well, is that what they need to do is that they need to stake out their ground. So think of it as a bit like when America started and there was just people down the East Coast. Some people got in wagons and started heading west. And what they're doing is they're actually staking out ground and actually forming communities and actually defining the areas and industries that they work in. And they're able to do that by what we're seeing is that they're become the leading technical and commercial digital influencer within their space. And we have a great David and Goliath moment where small companies can basically take over and completely own the oxygen for the whole of that environment, and whether it's oil and gas, whether it's professional services, and we're seeing this taking place on digital right now. And that's what we're seeing that's going to take place certainly over the future and over the next 3 years.
Tim, thank you very, very much. That's why I love this end of the year event. So we get these fascinating glimpses as to what you think has been happening over the last 12 months, and some really exciting thoughts about what's going to happen in the coming year. I think, Kinga, maybe we should write down some of these predictions, and then end of next year we'll see how they worked out. But now is the time for all of us to have a